that they, both Brian and Daniel, are out, so they delegated to me running this meeting. So I hope we can still get through everything, have a good time. So let's start out with our highlights. I'm really excited because I didn't have to fill this out, and I just get to thank everyone for doing great stuff. So really thanks to the Beam project. I don't know if we have anyone here from there, but they apparently have added an Iceberg sync. And one of the most exciting things for me when I'm working on the Iceberg project is knowing that we keep getting more and more of these integrations, so people just have more options to work with the project. Thanks to Rahil for working on pagination for listing namespaces, tables, and views. I can tell you from our perspective that is extremely important. At Apple, we have a lot of very, very large namespaces and such, and that's very key. Thanks JB for working on stale PR management. I assume this is some work helping us to clean up GitHub, which definitely has a lot of stale issues. Thanks to Edward for doing 2 different delete-related things. Thanks for that work on the overwrite files and the root delta. And then thanks to Chauncey and JB for the fixes for the JDBC catalog. Again, I feel like that's really important because that code is kind of belying a lot of people's REST catalog implementation. So thanks a lot for working on those fixes. And then thanks to my buddies Rodrigo and Peter for their work on the Flink project. I know it's been a little while since Flink's gotten a lot of love, and I'm really glad that they're stepping up and putting the effort in to make sure that Flink is still a first-class member of the Iceberg project. All right. So with that as highlights, do we have anything else that anyone wants to note? If not, we can go straight to our release comments here. First thing to point out here is the Java 1.5.2 release is currently up for voting. This is actually very important because our 1.5.1 artifacts are slightly broken for certain Spark Scala combinations. So if you haven't had a time to check this out and vote, even if you're not a member of the PMC or a committer, it's really important to have people go out, test that out, make sure that things are working properly this time, and give your support to the release so we can get that out and get some folks unblocked and able to move to the newest version. Next thing to note is the PyIceberg 0.7.0 release is just about to get done. So as noted in the document, if there is anything you want to get added in, please go to the milestone on GitHub and make sure you add that in so that it's known before they push the release buttons. All right. That's all of our announcements. Then after that, we basically need to start going into our discussion phase. I know this first one is probably added by Zihan. Is that you for the geo support proposal?
Yeah. Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, I was actually thinking maybe we could go more in depth next week or next time as there's more people available. But I just wanted to call out that the geo support has been added. So proposal has been added. Sorry, not the real code. And just want people to take a look and add comments. There's already a lot of discussion there, so please feel free to take a look.
Yeah, thanks, Ihan. I mean, this is a really exciting proposal. If you are in any way interested in geometric types or geometric partitioning functions, anything that geographic partitioning functions, anything to work with geodata, there's a lot of new information in that proposal, and it'd be really great to get this into the Iceberg project natively. It's kind of an exciting new avenue for us to explore. Next up on discussion, we have view support for Hive Catalog. I don't know who added that one on.
I think it's me. So this development was happening from long time. We have some back and forth about refactoring for table and view and have a different abstraction. But the changes was going very big. So after a proposal from different people, we thought first we'll add view and then we'll look to the refactoring part later on. Edward has already reviewed on a high level, but we need someone from Hive core who can just take a high level look.
Okay.
That's why I added that.
Well, in the general call out then to the community, if anyone is interested in that project, that'd be really helpful if you could go take a look at that. We're primarily just looking for reviewers now?
Yeah, correct.
All right. I know we definitely have interest in that, so I'll probably ask some folks from our side to take a look as well. Yeah. Is there any big questions you wanted to bring up for everyone while we're here to try to get answers on, or just
No,
one?
I think I'm good. Yeah, we'll see if something else can come up. Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. Well, yeah, Brian, I think this may be one of our fastest sync ups. Yeah, I just don't think we have a lot of other things to talk about or argue about today. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think our best arguers are often an offsite.
Oh,
So yeah, I think that's what's going on. But I would want to take just a second to, like, if anybody who is on, because we have like such a huge amount of time, if anybody's had something that's on their mind that they haven't been able to bring up, or they feel like they've maybe hasn't had the time to air out in a forum like this, maybe just give you a couple minutes to raise your hand, or if you're too shy to do the voice or camera thing, you can throw up a message real fast, and we can maybe discuss it that way. We'll give a couple minutes for that.
yeah.
Anything? How are things going? Like, one thing I do also want to mention while we're waiting for anybody to bring up something else is Iceberg Summit is definitely coming up soon. Holy crap! When is it? Oh, Rakesh, go ahead, and I will look up details on Iceberg Summit to close this out later.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Russell. Just a quick question. Do you folks know if there has been any discussion or movement on the idea of introducing permissions or ACLs into Iceberg tables? I know Jack had a proposal a while back. I work at Netflix, and we have our own sort of infamous ACL model at this time. But just wanted to see if that's something.
What was the question? I didn't.
It's around.
For tables as a native part of the Iceberg spec.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I personally have always kind of been against that idea because I kind of always have seen it as a catalog responsibility. Just because, like, we write immutable tables mostly, and I always kind of think of permissions and security as kind of being a more mutable layer there. But I know as part of the REST spec is like a different thing altogether, right? Like, if it's a responsibility of the catalog, I think that's pretty reasonable to start thinking about.
What actually, maybe that's something we could just touch into a little bit, because maybe there's a good documentation / blog that needs to be written there about, if it's not part of the Iceberg's table spec and it's not part of the REST catalog, where does that fit in, and is there is there a way, that a best practice way to kind of go about doing this? And maybe if anybody has their own theories, I'd sure like to hear how Apple handles that.
Yeah, I mean, so like our basic theory of the problem here is based on how we're divided at Apple. And I can't talk a lot about exactly how this is all structured, but you can basically know that we have a catalog team. We have
You're among friends here, Russell. Just tell us. No.
Yeah, it's recorded live forever. Yeah, so like we basically have a catalog service which is responsible for governance and permissions and things like that. And because of that, we are basically delegating all of our auth to that. Before that, it would have been the Hive Metastore. We've been like, you have a Metastore, your Metastore has ACLs for the entities within it, and we rely on that for the actual access to tables. I do think that maybe this is something that needs to get added into the REST spec for the catalog, just because for those kinds of systems, for people who are using a REST catalog that doesn't have controls there, there's no like unified way of saying I want to add permissions to a table. It's all like specific to that implementation, which is not a problem for us because we have to do that anyway. But it might be a problem for someone who in this community who wants to like build a REST catalog product and wants to sell that, and you want to have a way that's easily switchable between REST catalogs between different different companies or something like that.
Would it make sense to almost like, so one thing I like about how I've seen things, particularly like say for views, there's a separate spec, for Puff and there's a kind of separate spec, and it's kind of like in its area. Would there be possibly a REST spec that is kind of is owned by the Iceberg community, but then it's like if you're implementing the the REST spec as we know it today, and maybe somebody like is fine without necessarily integrating like ACLs or any of their like security specific systems there, like maybe keep that as an optional thing. Has there been any discussions around there that, or do you think it's something that gets integrated directly into the REST spec as a, you know, and then this should be a final answer, like make sure that, you know, this will override anything Ryan says in the future. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to know Jack's opinions on this. Again, I don't really have a lot of, I don't have a horse in this game right now, because like this would not help or hurt me in any way.
Yeah.
You know, from my perspective, I don't really benefit or get pain. Like if it's added to the spec, I'm just not going to implement it for our use case, because
And that's why my question comes in is like, if there's people that are running just fine without having this as part of, then, you know, do you make that a separate piece? And then that just becomes an optional layer that we all come to a collective agreement on in the Iceberg community. But it's like, I thought Steve was telling me to, hey, since not enough people are here to debate this correctly, we shouldn't be talking about this. But yeah, I just think, you know, maybe it would make sense to have that as a separate entity, and it's kind of optional, but at least has a standard way to do it, where if we wanted to connect that up to, I have nerded hardcore out on OPA, and I think it's cool. It's kind of like a cool thing to me, but some people like hate it. But you know, but I think OPA is an option, right? Like, especially if you're in the Trino side and you've integrated that, right? Like, that might be an option where if you had a REST API around that, you could make some integration with OPA there, or whatever internal system that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is kind of like, it's difficult because this would be specifying things that would not be in the Iceberg core library. Like I don't think we would add something to the Iceberg core library that's like iceberg.table.modify ACLs, which would be this API. It would just be like, this is what we're asking people to do to kind of be consistent.
I think plus one on that, separating out the table spec versus the REST catalog spec, and then putting this in. And in our use case, it sort of came up as we are trying to integrate with, say, third-party vendors like Snowflake using our REST catalog endpoint, right? And we don't want to start syncing oracles across to Snowflake's as our back and things like that.
Yeah, I would love if we had some Snowflake reps here right now to discuss their plans on that. Because yeah, I mean, I know that I believe the current model they have is to just pull everything into Snowflake, and that you have to redo ACLs there to properly do that.
We ended up building something like that, actually. So it would have been
Yeah, I think it's like standard, like having this place to build the standard, even if we don't have an implementation for it necessarily, like having this place to be like, well, what's a good, almost effectively codifying a best practice that everybody kind of agrees on. And it doesn't, it's like optional and it's all these things, but maybe that's something to bring up on a, you know, future discussion, or we could even bring it up if Rakesh, if you want to bring it up on the message board after this, and we can chime in, you know, all of our individual thoughts. I have all sorts of thoughts on this, because I like the idea of making a standardized way that people can kind of build an integration to when they like have a certain system that they like OPA or
something that way.
Yeah. Or if you're on like a Hive Metastore and you want to make an integration there, that anything that's stored in Hive Metastore, you could technically make that kind of like put a layer on top of that both you know, that and another system would agree on that you eventually migrate to.
Yes.
So
yeah, I mean that is very appealing to me. But
yeah, makes sense. Thanks, folks.
Cool. Thanks.
I had a question. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Steve asked a question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'll read it out, and then somebody else can answer. Since all experts are here, one unrelated question is, Iceberg, I don't know if that's the being facetious or not, is Iceberg table property GC enabled, can be used to prevent drop data files, or is there any flag that can make a table read only?
Yeah, we don't have that. I mean, that's a rough one too because we don't have a server component. So like that's the problem with all kind of Iceberg things. If you don't have a REST catalog, is that it's up to the client to decide whether or not it's going to follow any of your properties. So like
Yeah.
GC enabled was added as kind of a security valve to protect people from doing things that we knew definitely weren't the case. But if you just use an Iceberg client that came out before that property existed, you can do whatever you want. Or if you want it, because we have a spec, we have an open spec, you can write whatever client you want in some other language or in Java, just a different one that ignores it. So that's our problem, is that we can't ever really promise that things will be read-only. Because the format doesn't control it. But I don't know, maybe worth thinking about adding that as a possible spec thing. I don't know.
And Naveen, you mentioned something on the chat, but feel free to just shout it out here on the recording.
No, I have a kind of questions on a different part, not on so if this is done. I was exploring about rewrite data files API. So currently it actually takes all the data files, delete files at once, and then try to commit after generating manifest files. So for some engine, if the file table is very huge, there are chances it will increase the heap pressure. So I was just like doing some exploration. If we, instead of writing the manifest during commit time, is it a good idea to write a manifest just during append time and keep it open, manifest writer? During commit time, just try to close. So my proposal is more around flushing the data files after a certain threshold.
Yeah, so implementation different depending on what implementation you're using. I don't know if that's possible. So the Spark one, right? So Spark sends back, has writers, and each writer exists on a different executor, and each executor sends back a write commit message when the task is complete. So we don't actually get which files we need to add to the manifest until the task's report commit status back, and Spark calls, I think it's like commit partition or something. Like they have a higher level commit function, and that's when we get the response back and are actually able to write manifests. Maybe that needs to be changed.
Spark has another flavor of partial progress enablement also. So using that, it can reduce the heat pressure. But unless if any engine is not honoring the partial progress, so it is becoming. And also, if you want to honor a single commit, definitely this can be prevented using multiple commits.
Yeah.
But if you want to do the single commit.
Yeah, I was thinking more of like mechanically within how Iceberg or how Spark calls within a single job. It
Right.
kind of has those limitations on like when it has that information to start writing. Something I've been thinking about a lot, and maybe this is another solution to the problem, is just being able to put a limit on how many files get rewritten. Because we have all that logic in there. It'd be really easy to just say like, I want my rewrite data files to touch no more than 10,000 files or something like that. And that way you could make it, it still would be like an incremental thing, but each time you know how much work, the maximum amount of work you would do. So you can kind of judge that a little bit better and not have as long commits.
Yeah. So we already have another mechanism of rolling after a target file size. So, but everything is happening right now at a commit level. Before commit, if you want to flush such things, so as you were mentioning, let's say we'll go with the threshold count. Now, I was like thinking it will have two different flavors now, one for the count and another for size. So should we club and make only one thing, or I mean, yeah, if you're going in that direction, what will be the ideal way?
I mean, so there's the weaknesses. I have a few weaknesses in rewrite data files right now that I really want to address. One is that we don't really have a good estimate of work, and both number of bytes and number of files are like not super clear because of the other big weakness, which is this is the Spark implementation only, although I think Trino actually has the same problem, is that many small files end up getting read and rewritten in like basically in serial. when we really should be opening up file handles as quickly as we can. So like the use case where I have, you know, 1,000,000 1 kilobyte files is impossible to complete right now because we start up a task that's like, well, I have 1,000,000 1 kilobyte files. I need what, like 500,000 of them to be read in a single task and then written into a new file. And waiting for all of those files to open costs so much more than anything else we could possibly be doing. We just need to be opening them as quickly as possible in parallel. So I think we first fix that problem, then we can probably just say it's based on number of files or number of bytes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room there for improvement.
Yeah.
But I do a limit on how many bytes you're going to compact, or a limit on how many files you're going to compact would probably be a good flag to be able to pass through.
Yeah, any flush mechanism before commit would be good to prevent a heap pressure. And I'm thinking more in that direction. But one.
Well, the flush is just hard because you have to get the list of files that have been written from the executors, and I don't think you have. I don't think Spark calls that the commit call until after every single one of the files has been written, which is like the big pain. So like your granularity gets stuck at the Spark job level.
Yeah. I think should we start a thread, or what do you propose? Like, is it just worth spend? Like,
I would love to start a thread discussing that. I mean, I really think that just giving a limit on the number of files that you're allowed to rewrite would be good enough here, because like that is going to be directly related to how large your heap is. That's the amount of metadata we need to have on the driver. The writing of manifest files, I would love to do live. I just don't know how to do that in Spark without not using the data source v2 API. I think the data source v2 API is maybe the big issue there. I should check that though. But yeah, look at the data source v2 commit method, because that's the first place we have a list of all of the data files that have been written, and that's the earliest possible time we could start writing a manifest.
but the delete files we write to a single manifest file. So in worst scenario, still the heap problem won't be solved because using delete files still it can increase the memory utilization. So only for data file entry we roll after target file size, but so I don't know, like what will be the best way to, if you really want to solve the problem.
Wow, Zion, how do we apply this?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
When we're applying delete files, like, do we always have to load every single one when I mean, we have to read them all.
Oh, is the heap problem due to the number of delete files being read?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Anton would be the the one I think did more work on that part.
Yeah.
No.
I mean,
is the
them all.
Anton made a change to generate the file scoped delete file. Is that enabled?
Right.
Yeah, that's not a question for Naveen, I think.
I don't know. We have an internal build that I know he was using it on. But yeah, you have to read all the delete files. I mean, that's kind of required to actually read the data file. So I'm not sure that there's a way around that. I don't know. Let's start a thread and we can discuss, see if there's other thoughts there. But I think generally, I mean, the idea would be to compact your delete files first, which could be done with a limit, so you wouldn't have to compact all of your delete files together at the same time, and then work on that. Because once you have one-to-one delete files to data files, like Stevens mentioned, then it's still a one-to-one ratio, or one after you do a compaction, it would be a 1-to-1 ratio. So you could do a rewrite position delete files and do a rewrite data files, and it would have a pretty constant memory usage.
Cool. Thanks. I'll start a thread.
Awesome. I actually thought of a question on where we're at. Did we ever I feel like the message board had a couple threads on this, and I lost track of what the final decision was. But did we ever figure out what's being said about the reference implementation? If that's going to be an Iceberg thing, or somebody's just going to like build one on their own to just kind of like I know there's technically like the Gravitino one, and there's like the,
yeah.
Like, I think we said we weren't going to kill all of, like, I think the last thing I heard was that instead of, like, I think there's a lot of concern about the risk of the slippery slope of building that out and having it managed by Iceberg to be the like official one.
Yeah.
But so my thought is like, I might maybe take a stab at, like, I mean, obviously there's the tabular one, but I want to do one without Docker and have like a super like minimal version so that you could just see like a skeleton and get that working like locally on your laptop. That's like that's my big personal goal with having like a reference implementation one, is just to have like a very like small one that's easy to have run even without like Docker or any other dependencies than like maybe Python or one other small thing.
I mean, I know I'm still in favor of having a reference one, or at least one open source one that's kind of focused on the Iceberg project that you could use. I know we have some worries about like having a production server thing that's like part of the community, but I also don't feel that fear. I don't know, coming from the Cassandra project, servers,
yeah,
it's possible. You can have server projects that go in open source.
Yeah. Do you feel like it might take away, like, I think the biggest thing is like it's taking away focus of like, developing the spec and the libraries and there's already plenty of things that you have to worry across integrations with all these other engines. So is that what seems to be the main concern, is like the focus?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, it's also the idea of like, well, can you release things in the spec without having them in the reference, and then like who's going to do that, right? Like I want to add something new to the REST spec because I want people to be able to take advantage of something, or me as a vendor, or me as like a big company want to add this kind of feature set and want everyone to be able to work with this. Then we need to have someone who goes to this reference implementation and actually does that as well.
Yeah.
But I don't have as much fear around that like falling behind. I mean, it's okay, I think, if it doesn't always support everything, but I'd love there to be an open source option that's truly open source and not owned by any particular company that can kind of grow along with the Iceberg project.
So I work for Tabular, but like I've always thought about like just to make even a small one, not for production, but like Joe, like I did this for Trino getting started setup, which was like just basically a Docker setup to do a lot of this stuff when that was really the only option. But nowadays people are really into like, I only want Python as a dependency, and I want to like try everything out. And so my hope is to get like the pip install, let me play around with like, everything Iceberg. You can kind of do that with some pieces in PyIceberg, but it's not quite there yet. And so I've thought about building out like a minimum viable version of the REST spec in Python. I know we kind of have like a test one too that I might be able to start with, but I don't know. I don't know if that's probably not what you're actually hoping for. Like you probably want something that's actually somewhat more production level.
Yeah, I mean, so we've had a lot of discussions internally about trying to get stuff into open source as well. I mean, I don't know if any other of the companies here are trying to do this, but I mean, it would be really great to have a kind of group project that everyone could be contributing to.
Yeah.
Everyone who isn't a vendor. I know some folks, that would not be your jam, but that's totally all right.
I'm perfectly fine with it. And I work for a vendor, so.
I'd like to contribute there if you guys want. We did at AWS when we were working on putting out a REST little prototype. It was kind of difficult not knowing what to base this off of, because you guys, there's a lot of Docker images rather than like examples on how to interact with the REST spec and what's expected. And without, I know it's defined in the spec, but it's like, yeah, you have to kind of look at the code and see how things are still used to.
Yeah.
Given now that I've done it, I'd like to help out there if you have any tasks.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a starter, right? Like if we have like one person, we don't have to make this agreement for like the ice. I think the concern really comes down to this becoming an Iceberg community like responsibility. So I think like having a good chunk of the Iceberg community gather in on like some spec that's out there to basically just like, you know, and it could be under yours, my like GitHub account, and there's no guarantees that we're going to keep this up kind of thing, right? It's just there as it is. And, you know, I think that takes some of the pressure off of like keeping this like, oh, well, this isn't the perceived, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that might be a good medium ground. And then if this gets enough, like if this is, you know, the idea would be if we want to make the goal eventually to make this something that we consider to get contributed to the community, then the idea might be like we try to keep very little opinions. It sounds like that's the big concern, is like don't have like metrics or your security integration. Like it has to be very thin, I guess is kind of the idea. Is that what your sense is, Russell?
Well, the problem, so I don't know how many other folks have this problem, but our problem at Apple, right, is we can't contribute to something like that. Like engineers at Apple could not contribute to something that's in your repo. We would only be allowed to contribute to something that's in a open source, like Apache kind of repo. Anything, the way our rules work basically is we can do anything we want that's Iceberg.
Okay.
So if it's not part of Iceberg, then it like gets rough for us.
Yeah. What is there Apple open source? Like, is there like one that would be trusted enough where it's not just Joe Schmo, Brian Olson, or Drew, you know, repo, but it could be something a little more like associated? Would that be something that might be fudgeable? And especially if it's like, you know, I think Apple's probably the company we're talking about with the most red tape. And so maybe if we could have you know, like an Apple open repository that's an official Apple repository. Is there anything like that?
I think that might be possible. I'll have to talk with our folks about this. I mean, I think the ideal situation for us is that it's like kind of at the level of like Iceberg Rust or Iceberg Go, where it's like it's not the primary repository, but it's got Iceberg there. It's related to the community.
It's under Apache, right?
Steven is nodding. He knows my pain here.
Yeah. I totally get like that's where I'm like thinking, is there some middle ground where we don't have to get all the Apache PMC on board on like, you know, owning this thing as an official Apache thing, and then maybe once there's enough trajectory around this thing, and we've almost effectively have that out there in public as like, this is a good working protocol to like, you know, good working implementation that enough people think is good enough, maybe it makes sense at that point to bring it on officially. And so that's where I'm thinking, like, it's a good science project to see where we can get with that.
Yeah. I think we should probably start a mailing list discussion, kind of figure that out, and we can talk with our OS review board and see what they'll let us do and how much they'll let us just put there.
I'm actually curious, is there any, like, we had somebody here on Netflix, like if there was something in Apple's open source repository, would Netflix be able to contribute to that? Most likely, or would it not matter? I'll be able to mess around with it.
Yeah, I don't know if we have an Apple one. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to figure something out. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I also think this goes hand in hand with the discussion prior for testing out the REST implementation that community members are doing. So I think having this, even potentially a portion of it living in the package, would be helpful for people seeing if the REST implementation is correct.
I mean, I agree. I'm a pro. There should be something closely related to the project that is like the test target as well. But yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think wherever the thread is, I like, or Drew, since you have a working implementation now and you're thinking about doing something there, or Russell, you know, I think maybe there's something that Apple would once we figure out all the legalese kind of thing, if you know, that might be the another way to go. So let's try to resurrect wherever the last part of that thread left off, and then I think keeping that conversation up, because I agree. I think like a good reference implementation that's not like tied, like that's not Gravitino. I'm not, nothing against them. It's just that, you know, you just like don't know any about like how the project will go out, and if it's like something specific to their needs versus the general community's needs kind of thing. So I think that will be really cool to see if we can move that forward at all. So cool. Well, we went further than we thought we were on this one, but we got a chance to bring that back up. Yeah. Any other things before I do my little Iceberg Summit reminder pitch thing to folks? All right, I'm going to share my screen. Maybe I can have my daughter push Iceberg Summit on you, because you won't be able to deny how cute it is if you say go to Iceberg Summit 2024. So next week we're having Iceberg Summit. It's a virtual only conference, and the we have, you know, a whole great roster of speakers, including our MC today, Russell, talking about all the good things that Apple's doing around Iceberg. Of course, Ryan and a lot of the other people that are part of Iceberg, but then also users. Just a lot of really cool talks around this. You can go look at the agendas here. So it's just iceberg-summit.org. And both my children are coming in right at the time of pitching all this. But yeah, just go check out the agendas. There's a lot of great stuff to you know, kind of learn about here, and kind of see maybe some of these questions even that we had here today around, like, you know, integrating security and all this stuff. Like, that's one of the great things about these ones, when they bring on a whole bunch of users and they all talk about like how they did solve problem X, Y, or Z. It's super valuable information to get out there, and yeah, ultimately fuels me so that I can actually like write blogs on and steal other people's brain power to make resources that other people can then use. So so definitely check this out next week. I think it's when is the 14th to 15th? I think it's a Tuesday and Wednesday, or is it Wednesday and Thursday? I can't remember.
Wednesday, because I'm speaking on Wednesday.
Okay, sounds good. So so definitely check that out. You can go register at the site to get your like free virtual pass. I don't think it's charged or anything like that. And other than that, I think that's pretty much it. Anything else, Russell, before we hop off?
No, we should do the next one in New Orleans next year. I've decided, since no one else is here, and we're gonna do Iceberg Summit in New Orleans next year.
Okay, tell me why New Orleans though.
Because I live here.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, well, then that makes sense. I can't say there's probably gonna be a huge support for New Orleans, given that like everybody requires you to go on the East or West Coast for these things. So, but I would totally be down to go to New Orleans. There's a lot of great whiskey down there, so a lot of great spicy food as well. So
like community event. If Community Over Code had theirs in, what was it, Nova Scotia or something?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think
and also I'm gonna have a barbecue cook-off.
And anyone who shows up here, you're welcome to my house. We can have the conference in my house. It'll be fine.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining and bringing your questions. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next 3 weeks. Take care.